Hey fellow tamers and Digitestant, it's Mike aka Sanaku from Overground and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back after a little extended hiatus over the last couple months. A couple reasons for that. First of all, we were kind of in this artificial extension of BT5 and there wasn't really much to talk about anymore. Other than that, my work schedule has just been kind of crazy busy and I haven't really had a chance to really sit down and talk to you guys about this game in a little while. But we're back at it again. We got a fresh new set, we got a fresh new set of starter decks, and we got a fresh new format to look forward to. So with that in mind, that means that it's time for our usual set tradition of bringing out the new Rainbow series. And this is going to be the Rainbow series for BT6. And for those who are unfamiliar, this series goes over our favorite cards, our favorite archetypes, and our favorite strategies of every new set release. And what we do is that we build one deck based at least in every color, or at least rooted within a very specific color. And in this case, we're going to be going over the color blue. And this is going to be a Hexeblaumon / Azulongmon at tempo / OTK deck. It kind of goes in both directions and you can kind of switch what you're trying to do on a very quick gear. Hexeblaumon was a bit of a... It was hyped up in BT5, but it didn't really show all of its potential just because it has severe lack of consistency. In between the release of the new starter decks, as well as some very important cards in BT6, Hexeblaumon actually gains a ton of consistency and a ton more power. And he also gets a good partner. Before, his best partner was going to be the original BT2 All-Force Digimon, but instead we get a new heavy hitter in the form of Azulongmon. And Azulongmon is just an absolute house. And we'll get to him very soon, and we'll kind of talk about all the cards that complement him as well as complement Hexeblaumon as a whole. So we're going to starting with our babies. We've got 4 copies of the new Kiaramon from BT6. And Kiaramon reads that once returned, when one of our opponent's Digivolution cards is trash, we actually get to draw one card. So this is kind of a big issue that Hexeblaumon had. Well, blue inherently has a lot of draw power in the game. Hexeblaumon specifically was a deck that couldn't necessarily play that much draw power because you needed to make sure every turn counted. You had to make sure that you put every single resource, every single turn into building up that one Hexeblaumon stack to keep your opponent off their tempo. And if you missed a turn, you were actually set behind and your opponent would actually get too much advantage on you. So while Hex could still kind of snowball into a win later on in the game, your early game draws were super important. So if you bricked and you could not draw out of it and you did not have any external ways to draw out of it, it was very difficult for you to get back into it. And Kiaramon, because you're playing so many cards that trash sources natively, because that's the deck's main win condition, you're going to be drawing more on a more consistent basis. And to round that out, we're just playing 1/5 copy of Upamon, and that's going to be the same thing that on attack declaration you get to draw one if our opponent has something without a source. Then we're going to go into our rookies. We're only playing 13 this time, and again, that's just due to some of the extra consistency cards that we have. We can afford to play a little bit less because we have a lot more draw power and we have a lot more search power. So we're playing 4 Bluecomon and 4 Gomamon. This is kind of standard that you would see in any Hexeblaumon list. These are the same inheritables where if we trash a source of our opponents, we actually gain 1 memory. This helps us extend our turn a little bit longer, while also helping us get more memory to get into our key plays. Next, we're playing 3 copies of a new card from BT6, and that is Gizamon. Gizamon reads that if our opponent has no Digivolution cards in play, this Digimon actually gains plus 2,000. And while that's not necessarily relevant in the terms of Hexeblaumon himself, because he does gain jamming if your opponent doesn't have anything without a source, it is very important for Azulongmon, because Azulongmon can swing for multiple security checks, and we want to make sure that he survives, because he unfortunately does not have jamming, but what he does have is 13,000 DP. And with Gizamon, that pumps him up to 15, and the number to beat this format is 14 when you're looking at the majority of the Bond decks. That means that outside of those, the only thing that could potentially take an Azulongmon down would be an Omnimon of some sort, and we're seeing fewer and fewer Omnimons in the format. Specifically, we're going to see them in purple decks, and we may see the OG original Omnimon or something like an X antibody in popular decks like Jessmon as well. And then rounding off the rookies, we're also playing the new card from BT6, Madoki Betamon. This follows in the same tradition as something like the Green Terriermon, the Black Chumon, the Purple Gazimon, where our opponent can't gain memory except through Tamer effects. And this is very important because of the introduction of the new memory boost cards. We can turn those off and prevent our opponent from cracking them in order to gain more memory and extending their plays and extending their turns. Moving on to the champions, we're playing 4 copies of Koalamon or Cielomon, however you want to pronounce them. Blockers in general this format are a little bit undervalued now. They don't have a lot going for them because, especially if you're going in against Bond decks, both red and blue, Friendship and Bravery, can just deal with blockers on attack declaration, so they're never really long for this world. And if you look at something in the context of Jessmon, Jessmon has piercing if its effect is going to go off, and we all know that it's going to. There's no reason why it should never resolve and bring out a Sistermon. So you're never really inclined, or there's no real incentive to block this format or to play many blockers because we're in a very heavy kind of build and raising area because there's a lot There's more removal in BT6, I think, than we've ever seen in the entire game. So keeping a Digimon up there just to protect yourself generally doesn't really get you that further ahead. You kind of want to build a good stack in raising. And if you can keep bodies up front, great. But I wouldn't necessarily invest those bodies into blockers unless you're in a game-losing situation where you need to play a blocker immediately or else you're going to be out of the game on the following turn. And that's why we're just playing the 4. Also because it's a 1-cost evolution, it helps us turbo into our top end a little bit faster. After that, we're playing 3 copies of Lobomon. This is to complement the fact that we're playing multiple blue tamers, and because we're playing a lot of heavy security plus swings, this helps us close the game out just a little bit faster. Moving on, we're playing 2 copies of Ikakumon. This is from all the way back in BT1, and it reads that this Digimon can't be blocked by opponent's Digimon without Digivolution cards. And well, again, with Hexeblaumon in play, your opponent's blockers without Digivolution cards can't attack or block anyway. This is primarily here for Azulongmon because it makes sure that we can get into our opponent's security completely unhindered. And finally, we're playing another 2 cards, new cards from BT6, which is going to be Mojiamon. Mojiamon reads that if our opponent has something without Digivolution cards in play, he gains jamming, and when attacking, we can trash 1 Digivolution card from the bottom of one of our opponent's Digimon. The jamming here, it just helps us get some early aggression, especially if we have the opportunity to go wide and build multiple stacks. We can start building up to our Mega in the raising and then start kind of throwing the Mojimons at our opponent up front. And that way he can kind of start chipping away so that the game will be a lot easier for us to finish off when we get to our top end. But Mojimon's Inheritable is also very powerful because it's just another way to trash sources, and that'll turn on stuff like your Kyomon, stuff like your Upamon, stuff like your Blukamons and your Gomamons. And it enables your Azulongmons and your Hexeblaumons to kind of reach their full potential as well. Next, we're playing the Ultimates, so we're going to play 4 whole playsets of, well, a whole playset, rather, 4 whole copies of Crisp Eldramon. This is the, standard Hexeblaumon play that you would have seen in the last format as well. And this is the on Digivolve, you trash the bottom card of all of your opponent's Digimon. It has the Inheritable, where if your opponent has a Digimon in play without Digivolution cards, we gain Security Attack +1. This is very powerful with the original Hexeblaumon combo, because you would swing, trash up to 2 sources. If you had Sora Joes in play or any other effects that are kicking around that could trash more sources, that would trigger the ability to get Security Attack +1. You can swing in with jamming for Security Attack +1. But usually you would complement that with the old starter deck where Garurumon that actually had the exact same Inheritable. But instead, we have a new card from BT6 in the form of Majiramon that does something a little bit better, I think. So Majiramon on Digivolve, we get to trash the Digivolution card from the top of one of our opponent's Digimon, which is a little bit different compared to all the bottom trash sourcing that we're doing up to this point. Because sometimes, depending on how your opponent builds their stack, they can kind of squeeze in a very important Inheritable in the middle. And if you're getting from the top, you can actually hit more powerful Inheritables a lot quicker. And then Majiramon has the Inheritable where on attacking, if your opponent has no Digimon Digivolution cards in play, we can unsuspend this Digimon. And what this is very important to do is this is very important for something like Azulongmon because we can swing in for several security checks, unsuspend it, and then go to do it all over again. And in the context of Hexeblaumon, it basically gives us Security Attack +1 to Hexeblaumon because he'll be able to swing twice with that jamming ability already. Rounding off into our level 6s, we're playing 4 copies of Hexeblaumon. You know him, you love him, you played him last format, but you just couldn't get him to stick. And now I think he's going to stick a little while longer. But, the effect, if you're unfamiliar, on attack declaration, trash 2 sources from the bottom of your opponent's Digimon, and then if your opponent has something without a source in play, he gains jamming. And then any Digimon that your opponent have that have no sources cannot attack or block. And then we're pairing him with a new addition from BT6, which is Azulongmon, which is my favorite Sovereign. And Azulongmon reads that when we Digivolve into him, we can trash 1 Digivolution card from the bottom of all of our opponent's Digimon, which is actually really relevant, because Azulongmon and Majiramon specifically only work if your opponent has not a single Digimon in play without a source in order to get the unsuspend. But Azulongmon also reads that for every single one of our opponent's Digimon without Digivolution cards, after that effect originally resolves, will gain 1 memory back. So he is 5 to evolve, which is a very heavy investment. But depending on how wide your opponent's board is, you can actually cheat him into play for very, very, very cheap. And Azulongmon is very powerful in the context of the Jesmon matchup, for example, because due to their ability to go wise with multiple Sistermons, and the fact that Sistermons cannot evolve, they're always going to be stuck in play without a source. And so what Azulongmon does is that you can evolve them for 5, and then let's say your opponent has like a Jesmon and 2 sisters out, that's 3. You're going to gain 3 memory back. You've essentially evolved into this huge monster for 2 memory, which is very, very, very impactful. But furthermore, what sets Azulongmon apart is that for every single one of your opponent's Digimon without a source, he gains Security Attack +1. So let's go back to that Jesmon example, and let's say they have 3 Digimon out, and you manage to trash the sources out of the Jesmon, which you're going to between all of your effects. Now, you're swinging with the Azulongmon for Security Attack +3, and if you have the Majiramon underneath and your opponent has nothing without a source, you can unsuspend that Azulongmon immediately. So Azulongmon is here to kind of just rip your opponent's security apart, and then we've got stuff like the Blitzomnimon or the Lobomon to kind of finish the game off. Now we're going to move on to the Tamers. We got 4 copies of Sora and Joe. I don't feel like you really need anything else in this matchup. And we're not playing Davis anymore because we have the blue memory boost instead. In the blue memory boost, all the memory boosts that were introduced in the new starter decks read that we reveal the top 4 cards of our deck and we add that respective color Digimon to our hand. And in this case, we could reveal 4 cards out of blue Digimon from our deck to our hand. And because these cost 3 instead of 4, it doesn't necessarily end our turn when we're playing it. But it also has the fun delay mechanic where on the next turn after it was played, we can actually sacrifice it to gain 2 memory. So in the context of where Davis was automatically setting us to 3, with Sora Joe, if our opponent puts us to 1, but they still have something without a source, we're still going to go to 3 anyway. And with the memory boost, if our opponent puts us to 1, we can always just crack it to go to 3 and just play our turn out as normal anyway. But between Sora Joe and the memory boost, we should theoretically start our turns, or at least play out our turns with a significant amount of memory when you combo that with the stuff like the Gomamon and the Blue Gomamon as well. And we're rounding out our memory boost with 1 copy of Howling Memory Boost. This is here for 2 reasons. It helps us kind of keep one of our opponent's Digimon at bay, because we can target something without a source and have it not be able to attack or block. We also get to trash 2 sources on activation, so if our opponent has something that's threatening lethal, we can play it, take away 2 of its sources, and then stun it for a turn. We also get that delay mechanic as well, where we could gain 2 memory later on. And the ability to just play it and trash 2 sources immediately means that it'll activate our entire deck if we're in a pinch. It's just kind of a quick panic button to play. And then the last 2 options are going to be 2 Rattle Stars. So this reads, it's a new card from BT6, return 1 of your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon to the hand, but if they have 3 or more in play, you can return 1 Digimon to the bottom of the deck instead. This is just much needed removal when you're in a bit of a pinch. So yeah, that is it for the deck. This is going to be the first episode of the BT6 Rainbow series. Again, this is just as every single deck that we build in this series. They're always first drafts. So we take the initial idea, we're going to test it into Oblivion, we're going to see what needs to be changed, and we're always looking for comments and suggestions. So if there's anything that you would want to add or change to this deck, please feel free to let us know. If you like what we do here at Overground and you missed us, please give us a subscribe. If you stuck around this long and you missed us, thanks for coming back. And yeah, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so I know what content is going to be reaching you guys and what you want to see. So I have been Mike, aka Sanaku. Thanks so much for watching again, and we'll see y'all in the next episode of the Rainbow series.